and good morning to all the distinguished people who are here with us in Sandton, and also to all the viewers. The issue that I've been asked to speak about is the BEE, but in particular I think some of the modifications and refinements and amendments that we're trying to bring about to the BEE framework. Let me just start off by saying that there are two interlinked processes that are underway right now. The first is that there is out for public comment some changes in the secondary legislation and the regulations, which are the codes of good practice. Those have been out for public comment already since the early part of this month, and we have proactively been engaging with business organizations, with state-owned enterprises, with other government departments, with verification agencies, with multinational corporations, and so on. And we will continue to be proactively involved in consultations with provinces in the near future, but members of the public are, of course, welcome to make their own inputs into this ongoing consultation process. And simultaneously with that, we have an amendment to the main bill, an amendment bill, which is currently with the state law advisors, and I'm informed will be introduced into Parliament within the next few weeks. So we're talking weeks rather than months, and then that bill will go through the normal parliamentary processes. Now, what's behind both of these, the bill and the codes that we're trying to bring about? I think my point of departure is that we continue to regard broad-based black economic empowerment as an imperative in South Africa. It's an imperative from the point of view of equity, and it has a political dimension, therefore. We cannot have an economy in which the people are allowed to vote at the political level but are not able to benefit from involvement in the economy. But it's also an economic imperative. Later this week, we will be getting the preliminary results of the census that was conducted. And I'm sure that that census will tell us that people with the pigmentation that I have are probably less than 10% of the population of this country. And we cannot run an economy, an effective economy, that draws its leadership at all levels, that draws its entrepreneurial capacity only from a very small minority of the population. It is an imperative that we draw our leadership, we draw our entrepreneurs much more broadly across the totality of our population. So we continue to operate on those premises. What we are trying to bring about by way of change is the product of extensive discussion in the Advisory Council, which was established under the chairpersonship of the President of the Republic and has been operating since the start of this term, the BEE Advisory Council. And we've gone through with a very self-critical comb and said, what is it about the BEE that is working and what is not working? And I think our overall conclusion is that BEE has delivered some benefits in terms of the participation of previously disadvantaged people in the economy, but it has delivered far too much passive shareholding in established companies and far too little by way of the generation of real effective leadership in the economy and real effective entrepreneurial development. That's what we have found. We have found that there are important parts of the overall scorecard which do encourage broad-based black economic empowerment, which do allow points to be earned for involvement in supplier development, which do allow for the emergence of dynamic relations between big and small companies, which do support training and skills development, which do support active engagement of black people in the management of companies. But we find that there's far too little involvement in practice in these elements, and in practice we find that there's far too much by way of passive shareholding deals. That's the problem that we find. Some of those passive shareholding deals are what we have used the term to describe them, complex fronting. Fronting, I think, in BE context is generally understood by way of the example where the cleaner or the gardener is called the CEO, and the company presents itself as a black-led or black-owned company when in fact it's not. Now, actually, we still find that there are examples like that around, as crude as that. But there's also a much more complicated and sophisticated form of fronting, and this takes the form of the presentation of complicated contracts where people think that they are going to become leaders, participants in the decisions of the companies that they are becoming involved in, but actually there you look at the small print and you find you're relegated to some subordinate position in those companies, which nonetheless continue to present themselves as though they are black empowered. That's the kind of situation that I think that we are finding ourselves confronted with. And so the two pieces of legislation, the codes and the bill, are intended to try to provide a more effective tool to support and encourage empowerment in the productive sense of the word among black people participating in the economy, both as leaders and players in established companies, but also by way of leadership of companies which are entrepreneurial in nature, but end up being in much more symbiotic relations with big companies as well as with government. And that's what the Act and the Codes, the Amendment Act and the Codes are about. So in the bill, we will be introducing for the first time a definition of fronting. Up to now, fronting is only actionable in terms of the common law offence of fraud. It is fraud. If you present yourself for a benefit from government or elsewhere as black empowered and you're actually not, it is a form of fraud. But we found that it's far too complicated, far too difficult to act on that. And so we're introducing a definition of fronting. We will be introducing a commissioner who will be charged with dealing with matters of fronting and who can impose various penalties in instances of fronting. The bill will also seek to promote an alignment between codes and the work of different sectoral charters and the overall framework of empowerment, and it will also seek to regulate the verification agencies which have sprung up and which provide the service of indicating to companies what your actual scorecard is. Then the codes, which we have out for public consultation. These are seeking to encourage much more symbiotic relationship between big and small companies. We find that in successful economies, the relationship between big and small companies is a dynamic and symbiotic one. That's what you find in Asia, where big companies have a number of suppliers working for them. The suppliers are drawn in to the value chains of those bigger companies. The bigger companies want good quality products from the suppliers, and so they're actively engaged in developing those suppliers in positive ways. That's what I think we want to see. We have a few instances in South Africa, but far too few of that kind of practice. And I think we want to use the codes, among other things, to encourage that so that we can create a wherewithal whereby small businesses can be supported in becoming much more capable and much more entrepreneurial in their activities. And this is all linked to what the President has talked about. In general, in the New Growth Path, we're looking to support much more value-added activity, industrial development in our country. And the President has said, well, where are the black industrialists? And of course we have one or two, but we have far too few black industrialists in our country, and I think this is what we're looking to, is to create many more real players in the real productive economy. So what are we doing in the scorecards? Well, first of all, there are some changes in the architecture. At the moment, there are 7 elements of the scorecard, and these will be reduced to 5, and we will be increasing the number of points in the scorecard and the weighting of those points to give more effect to priority areas. We are also doing a number of things in terms of the various levels of recognition of the different categories, exempted micro-enterprises, as well as qualified small enterprises, the requirements in terms of turnover for the definitions of those. We're adjusting those largely to take account of inflation and changes in the economy. Then, in terms of the mergers, employment equity and management control. These were two separate elements in the existing scorecard, and they allowed, I think, a separation of the two, and I think supported the idea that employment equity could be passive in nature, and so we're actually merging the two into a single category of employment equity and management control, a single category that will deal with both of those. Then we had two separate elements, which was preferential procurement and enterprise development, and these two were also treated separately, and these will be merged into a single category called enterprise and supplier development. Then I think the very big important introduction, which we've got in here, is that we are introducing sub-minimum requirements for priority elements, for ownership, for skills development, and for enterprise and supplier development. And basically what we're saying that if you don't score the sub-minimum in those particular areas, and you are a larger business, what will happen is that we will reduce your overall scorecard, your overall score, by 2 points on the for larger businesses, and for qualified small enterprises by 1 place. So roughly speaking, you're going to have to meet the target of about 40% of the, you have to achieve 40% of the target for ownership, for skills development, and for enterprise and supplier development. And if you don't, then we will drop you 2 places on the scorecard if you're a large enterprise, and 1 place if you are a qualifying small enterprise. So if you were calling yourself a significant contributor to BEE at level 3, as an example, but you are not actually involved in enterprise development, enterprise and supplier development sufficiently, then we will drop you 2 places and you will go down to level 5. If you are a qualifying small enterprise and you were 3 and you're not involved, let us say in skills development, then you will go down to level 4. And I think we're saying essentially that we cannot any longer regard people as significant and major contributors to BEE if you are not involved in the broad categories of BEE, and particularly in the priority elements. That's the main, I think, refinement that we have put in. What we have also indicated is that we want to make things simpler for small black-owned enterprises that are trying to work with larger companies in terms of, for example, enterprise and supplier development. At the moment, we have found that many large companies insist that black-owned small companies that are working with them for supplier development will have to go out and get a verification agency to tell them that they are black-owned, and that they will then have to fork out, I'm told, something like 40,000 Rand for the privilege of doing that. And that is because the larger company is wanting to earn BE points and wants the verification certificate to be able to say that they're doing that. And we think that that is an inordinate and unnecessary burden on small black-owned enterprises. And so we're saying that an exempted micro enterprise that is 100% black-owned will automatically, without having to go to a verification agency, be regarded as level 1, and an enterprise that is 50% or more black-owned will automatically be regarded as level 2. So we are saying we want to reduce the cost and the bureaucratic hassle of small businesses that are going to enter into relationships with large businesses, and large businesses being encouraged through the sub-minimum to enter into those relationships. We want to reduce the burden of them having to comply in this way. The thresholds, as I mentioned, for the definition of the different categories have been adjusted. There is the category of exempted micro-enterprises. The threshold has been adjusted from 5 million to 10 million turnover. Qualifying small enterprises were a turnover between 5 and 35 million. That's been raised to between 10 and 50 million. And large entities of 50 million rand and above. That's in a nutshell what we're trying to achieve. As I said, the whole aim is to try to ensure that where there is involvement in black economic empowerment, where there are points earned for involvement in black economic empowerment, and remember, of course, that when you approach government for regulatory benefits or for tenders and things of that sort, the overall scorecard and the recognition level is often a criterion. We want to make sure that that is a tool for real active empowerment of black people. I don't want to pretend that this is going to be a magic wand that is going to create productive entrepreneurs across the economy. There are many more interventions, many more programs that we need to have in place to achieve that. But at least what we're trying to do is to align the BEE with the overall objectives of ensuring the emergence of more active players in the real economy, more active entrepreneurship, which means development of skills and capacities, more relationships of a symbiotic nature between large and small companies, and essentially, I think the slogan might be that we want to turn BEE from essentially supporting passive shareholding into something that supports a much more active and productive empowerment of black people across the economy. That's what we're trying to do, and that is the direction that the various pieces of amended legislation, either through the amendment to the bill itself or to the codes, that's what it is attempting to achieve. So as I said, we are now in a phase of public consultation about that. Active public consultation as far as the codes are concerned, and within the near future there will be consultation through the parliamentary process around the amendments to the bill which will be introduced in the near future. So I think that's in a nutshell. I look forward to the interaction with two very distinguished panelists, Sandile Zungu and Tami Mzwai, and also to engaging with the questions both from the audience that's here and from the listeners. So thank you very much indeed.